We will start the book of life. Like I said, today I'm excited. And the reason I'm excited, this one is Christianity and Reincarnation, Dogma versus Doctrine. And I'll share a personal story, and I'm not sharing this for sympathy. Okay, I'm sharing it because of the impact that it had on me to drive me to have understanding. Okay, I was raised Catholic, and between 13 and 18, I had 7 people in my family die, including my dad. And so I was always going to, my priest and the father saying, well, why my dad, why my uncle, why not this individual? This guy's a schmutt, you know what I mean? Why this? And I would just get, well, it's God's will or it's a mystery. And it never resonated. I just think, well, that means that God's love is arbitrary to me at that time, right? And then when I graduated, I moved to Europe. I started to read. One of the first books that I read was Isis Unveiled by Helena Blavatsky. And someone had turned me on to the Theosophical Society. And it blew my mind because she talks about reincarnation and why certain things happen. And I realized that when you equate the law of nature, okay, and we look at the divine laws of nature and think about Hermes Trismegistus, as above is like that which is below, right? So if we take those laws, the law of consequence, the law of change, right? Okay, the law of cycle. So if I plant rice, do I get mango or pineapple? No, I get rice, right? So, and it made sense then also what we talked about last week, what Erlin talked about last week and Kutumi talked about last week, which was the lack of awareness from past lifetimes, because we would guilt ourselves into oblivion if we knew what we had done in past lifetimes. Do you know what I mean? And so the time in between lifetimes is relative, right? And the more service we do, the longer we stay in that path of bliss before being reincarnated again. And then when I understand, and then thinking about what my teacher used to say, if you like rice, plant a lot of it. If you don't like it, stop planting it. That was his way of saying, you know what I mean? As you sow, so shall you reap. If you're not reaping something, then you're not sowing correctly, right? And Buddha said, if you want to know your past life, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future life, look at your present actions. And that is so profound. It is so profound. And that's why I couldn't wait to do tonight's reading from the standpoint of Christianity and reincarnation and why it was basically removed from a lot of the Bible before at the Council of Nicaea, right? I think it was like 553. And they removed as many passages as they could because they feel that if people thought they could come back, they wouldn't be able to control them. Right? And yet there are still passages in the Bible, and she brings these out, which we're going to go over, which specifically indicate they were too esoteric for the minds at that time. Okay, well, if you really think about it from your perspective, and you guys have all been on the path for a long time, right? Many, many years. If the masses knew about the law of reincarnation and they understood the law of reincarnation and not the transfiguration that, well, I come back as an animal, I come back, no, water cannot go back up to the top of the hill. Do you know what I mean? If they were to understand the law of reincarnation, it would end racism, it would end discrimination, it would end so many things because they would realize that they are responsible for their thoughts, emotions, speech, and actions. And if they realize that, they would have a little bit more self-control. And that's what Arlen talked about last week. We talked about, or 2 weeks ago, talking about the law of karma. Okay. And if people truly understood the law of karma, you wouldn't need anything because there'd be no need for jails. There'd be no need for anything because people would understand, as I sow, so shall I reap. But if people, quote unquote, think they're getting away with it, and that's why I love the quote of Buddha when he said, the evildoer thinks their actions are as sweet as honey because they haven't manifested basically yet, right? But when they do, they have to experience that. So the law of consequence is if I throw a ball at a wall, the ball's going to bounce back. The only determination is where's the wall? Is it in this lifetime? Is it right here? Or is it from another lifetime, right? Or from future lifetime or past lifetimes? So all of this taking into consideration, we think about our lives now, right now in this moment, and how blessed we are, okay? How blessed we are. And something that I want to throw out toward the end, and I'm going to do it now, is I want you for, let's say, somebody give me a number between, what's your favorite month? 2? Okay, what else? November, I like that. I'll explain why. 7, okay, good. So for you that have chosen those numbers, and I like December too, I like the higher numbers because it means we can start to focus a little bit more frequently. Is so 2 times a day or 7 times a day or 11 times a day or 12 times a day.
Oh.
Think about how grateful you are. Just take a moment and think about how grateful you are for where you are. We have health, we have awareness, we have access to teachings. Okay, so take a moment. Did you feel the crown open up when we just did that? Okay, so by being humble, it allows for a tremendous amount of energy to come down. So try that based on your birth month. Okay, if you want to go more, go more. If you want to go less, go less. But let's just try that once a day for however many times you want. Just stop at the top of the hour for 3 times a day or whatever, and let's just be grateful and see what happens. And just be grateful. Okay. All right. Enough talking for me. Let's get into today. Any questions before we begin? Anything at all? No. Okay. We'll invoke and then we'll get rolling. Just be in a receptive pose. Connect the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth, to the palate. Holy God, Holy Omnipotent One, Holy Immortal One, have mercy on us and on the whole world. To the great architect of the universe, Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, to the Lord Yehoshua Bar Miriam, Lord Kutumi, the Lord Christ, the Lord Buddha, to all the great ones, to Holy Master Choa Kok Sui, to Buddha Padmasambhava, to the Circle of Seven, Robert and Erlen, Master Astalea, again Lord Kutumi, Lord Rama, Lord Zoser, to the Astarian hierarchy, our celestial guides, our angel guides, our higher souls, we humbly invoke for your divine blessings. May we be a channel through which thy holy ones approach the world. May we be a center for the radiation of thy power. Teach us to travel light, that we may better gain the heights, break the bonds that bind. Teach us to give ourselves entirely to thy service, to attune ourselves to thy will. Teach us to lay down the small personal life for the greater cosmic life and to love with the love of God. Om Ma Ni Pad Me Okay. So we're going to start with Christianity, reincarnation, dogma versus doctrine. The first degree, lesson 20. Rebirth in the West. Perhaps one reason the Western world is reluctant to accept doctrine of reincarnation is because the writings concerning it have been too abstruse. Interspersed with Sanskrit words foreign to the Western mind, the concept often has not been clearly presented. Beclouded with Upanishads, the Vedic scriptures, Gita quotations, and Sanskrit terminology, the average mind has found the concept difficult to comprehend. But the rise of mysticism in the Occident has launched a mental swing toward the belief in rebirth. With the Western habit of research and objective analysis, it has become a live and significant issue. When the thought of rebirth was introduced to the Western mind in the latter part of the 19th century, it was received with incredulity and shock. Materiality was the order of the day, and it stood strongly entrenched in the artificiality of our modern concept of life. The mysterious and the supernatural were overshadowed by rationality. Then came the advent of Anton Mesmer, who set out to prove there were states of consciousness other than the familiar waking consciousness of our daily life. His experiments pointed toward control of the human mind. This gave birth to the field of psychology, mind experiments, and ultimately psychoanalysis. weaving their way through the uprising tide of psychic phenomena with the subtle undercurrents of rebirth, yoga, and spiritualism. The upsurge has now risen to the point where it can no longer be contained within the narrow walls of materialism, which once sought to hold it out. The 20th century has seen and will continue to see an extensive searching into these subjects. Believers are no longer generally discounted as intellectual misfits. Belief in reincarnation, not a panacea. The doctrine of rebirth has been for thousands of years widely accepted in the Orient. It would be a happy commentary if it could be said that belief in the doctrine had wrought universal rewards for its faithful, but such is not true. The beautiful basic concepts of the doctrine have been corrupted by teachings of animalistic transmigration, return of the human soul into animal form, and a shallow use of the concept has resulted in appalling social conditions. The Christian world, rejecting the idea of rebirth, has built into its social pattern selfishness, deceit, immorality, and has falsely labeled them freedom of the individual. Here, where the idea of one life, one opportunity is paramount, the success of that one life has seemingly been measured more by material success than by soul salvation. In the East, where reincarnation is accepted, evasion of personal responsibility for a better world is prominent. Those who have achieved social well-being have been quick to regard the misfortunes of others as due to karma created in a past life and do not see it as each person's responsibility to try to change the world for the better and assist those less fortunate. Aggressiveness and the spirit of personal conquest and achievement are held in abeyance. While the East has allowed its knowledge of rebirth to generate into inertia and irresponsibility, the West, in an effort to compensate for frustration and disillusionment in existing religion, has produced an attitude of pessimism and futility of life in general. It remains for the rising tide of mysticism to create a balanced sense of personal responsibility with a sustaining faith in not only the continuity of life, but an evolutionary process based upon the idea of perfecting the human personality through rebirth. If the Astarian precepts can help do this, a tremendous need will have been fulfilled, and the soul's spiritual growth will have been not only further accelerated, but we will be better prepared for the new approaching new age. A universal concept. One who has studied the lives and teachings of the great philosophers need not be reminded that practically all of them have been embraced the teachings of reincarnation, not as the retrogression of the human soul into animal form, but as an evolutionary process always moving forward toward eternal progression. Some ancient people, through the practice of traditional customs, voiced their belief in rebirth. A dead child was always buried near the door of its former dwelling, or even within range of the sleeping quarters of the mother, in hopes that its soul would re-enter her womb and be reborn to her. All the ancient scriptures of the world contain the doctrine of rebirth. It is a deep-rooted concept in Hinduism. Brahmanism teaches openly of it. It is contained in the Vedic scriptures. Krishna brought the philosophy to point humankind toward union with God. The Jewish Kabbalah points to the doctrine of reincarnation. Though the Kabbalah was once a well-guarded text, studied only by the Hasidic Jewish scholars, today its wisdom is explored by mystical seekers, Jew and non-Jew alike. It contains cosmology and the mystical doctrine of the soul and its initiations. The entire foundation of Buddhism is built upon the idea of rebirth. The ultimate goal of the Buddhist is to escape the wheel of life and death. The ancient Egyptians embraced reincarnation. Their revered Book of the Dead not only contains the doctrine of reincarnation, it instructs the soul on its course after the death of the body toward attaining advent into higher planes. The Gnostics taught rebirth. They were the philosophers who opposed the dogmas established by the early Christian fathers. Their Gnostic teachings were based upon the ancient religions of Egypt, India, and Persia. They also drew much of their wisdom from the mysteries, from the school of Pythagoras, and from the Chaldeans, whose wisdom gave birth to the Jewish Kabbalah and to the Zoroastrians. The Essenes of Palestine were a mystic order belonging to the mysteries. Those who were admitted into the inner teachings, their initiates, were few. Jesus was one such Essenian initiate. It was among the Essenes that Jesus prepared for his incomparable life mission. The doctrine of rebirth was a vital part of the teachings of the Essenes. All the great philosophers in their arcane schools taught of rebirth: Socrates, Plato, Plotinus, and especially Pythagoras, who lived around 530 BC. He was an initiate, not only in the mysteries of Egypt, but of those in Greece, such as the Eleusinian and the Orphic mysteries. He was also acquainted with the mysteries of Chaldea and the Magi. After he returned from his travels and initiations into the various mysteries, he established his own school at Crotona in Magna Graecia. His school embraced the doctrine of reincarnation, transmigration, and metempsychosis. The ancients have been accused of teaching transmigration and metempsychosis, the modern concept of which has come to mean the return of the human soul into the body of an animal. They did not so teach. They interchanged the three words reincarnation, transmigration, and metempsychosis. None of these, to the initiate, meant the return of a human soul into animal form. They taught that the human soul returned to inhabit a human form, but that the form was heir to certain animalistic qualities. Irenaeus, one of the early church fathers, had this to say about the teachings of reincarnation in the school of the Greek Gnostic Basilides: the vulgar superstition of transmigration, the passing of a human soul into the body of an animal, so often confused by the uninstructed with the doctrine of reincarnation, which denies such possibility, received a rational explanation at the hand of the Basilidian school. It arose from a consideration of the animal nature in man, the animal soul, or body of desire, the ground in which the passions inhere. Irenaeus explains what Plato said about reincarnation and transmigration. Plato, in the Timaeus, calls the same idea turmoil. He says, on this nucleus of the etheric form, other alien natures of the essence grow, such as those of the wolf, ape, lion, goat, and so forth. And then the peculiar qualities of such natures appear around the soul, causing the desires of the soul to become like the special natures of these animals, for they imitate the actions of those whose characteristics they bear. And not only do human souls thus intimately associate themselves with the impulses and impressions of irrational animals, but they even imitate the movements and beauties of the plants, because they likewise bear the characteristics appended to them. Nay, there are also certain characteristics of minerals shown by habits, such as the hardness of adamant, so taught Plato. Transmigration is also mentioned in the Pistis Sophia, but it is not used in the same sense that it is popularly understood today. Amen, I say unto you, she will not suffer that soul to escape from transmigration into bodies until it hath given signs of being in its last cycle according to its record of demerit. Quoting again from the Pistis Sophia, at that time, then, the fate shall show itself forth more, and also the mysteries in those days. And many souls shall pass through the cycles of transmigrations of body and come back into the world in those days. It is apparent that the teaching of transmigration and metempsychosis did not refer to the soul passing from human form into an animal body. Rather, it was used in the sense that we understand reincarnation today. The only thing animalistic about the ancient teaching of transmigration or metempsychosis was that the soul coming back into human form would be subjected to the animal nature of the human form. To the initiate, the human soul is always distinguished from the animal kingdom. Evolution can never work in reverse. The soul of the human can never become a part of a group soul of the animal kingdom again. Once a soul is individualized, it expresses always as human and evolves ever upward as a self-conscious ego. The initiates, when speaking of metempsychosis and transmigration, always use the terms interchangeably with that of reincarnation, and to them, all three terms always refer to rebirth and the evolution of the human soul in human form. The degree of unenlightenment is astonishing among even learned philosophers of the West. assuming reincarnation to be a teaching of the possible return of a human soul into the form of an animal, they vehemently and rightly reject the idea. But they appear to show little interest in understanding the difference between reincarnation as a basic fact in nature and the misinterpreted version of an ancient belief. However, since the West is presently involved in a struggle to understand the doctrine of life after death, it is not strange that rebirth has not yet come into consideration en masse. The popular mind must first be brought to a belief in life after death before rebirth can be considered. If one has been taught that the soul does not live on after death, if it sleeps until the resurrection, if it simply ceases to exist altogether, if it is eternally consigned to either heaven or hell, how then could it possibly be reborn? Modern religion must face and cope with the changing mental scene. The rise of atheism in the West has been due principally to the fact that massive groups of people, unable to accept the doctrine of vicarious atonement and eternal damnation, or the resurrection of the physical body, have rejected God altogether. Perhaps these unhappy thinkers would find a greater God and a greater good were they able to receive and understand the doctrine of rebirth. There's so much in this, I think that when you think about people and they see suffering and they say and they see the people and the individuals that are inhabiting certain bodies and they are quote unquote successful or they're suffering, we have no idea what that soul chose before it came in. That could be a very advanced soul who chose this as a lifetime in order to have certain lessons that were learned within this lifetime in that state that it chose. So to see someone that is suffering is not to assume that they have negative karma, quote unquote, right? It could be a choice of the soul, truly. Birth of a dogma. All the great religions of the world contain the doctrine of rebirth, except the modern Christian and Jewish faiths. And early spiritual or scriptural writings point to the obvious fact that these two embrace the concept in their original teachings. Because the doctrine was rejected by a group of men at the Constantinople Council, it is a strange reason to point to its rejection in the Western world, but such is true. It was at Catholicism's Second Council of the Church Fathers held in Constantinople in 553 AD that all direct references to reincarnation were deleted from what later became the scriptures of Christianity, the Holy Bible. But only direct teachings could be omitted. Many references were left in, since to remove all would have been well nigh impossible. Also, the still existent writings of many of the early fathers, such as Origen, St. Augustine, and St. Clement, cite teachings of reincarnation freely and express a complete understanding and belief in the doctrine. The Constantinople Council decided that belief in the preexistence of the soul before physical birth was heretical and denied it as a Christian doctrine. But they were blind to many of the obvious teachings in the scriptures before them at that time because they were reacting to what they considered to be undesirable spiritual influences. The principal purpose of the council was to denounce Origen, who several centuries earlier had been the chief spokesman for the new Christian religion. After many years of fighting the battle on the side of the church against the Gnostics, Origen had finally rebelled against its dogmas. An initiate who knew better, he had repudiated the dogma that a soul was newly created at the time of each human birth. He had also denounced the church fathers' newly conceived idea of blood salvation, vicarious atonement, and eternal damnation. Rejecting these dogmas, he turned to teaching his own ideas of truth. Origen taught that all souls were created at the beginning of creation as angelic spirits, and that as angelic spirits, they sinned. And because of this, they were transferred out of the Garden of Eden and into material bodies. Also, when he left the church, he returned to his earlier precept of rebirth. Because of such teachings, he was seized by the church and condemned as a heretic. He died under torture in the darkness of the Christian dungeons. Even though the church had sought every possible means to destroy all writings concerning it, the idea of rebirth had remained so persistent a part of the early Christian faith that it had become necessary in order to destroy it for the official church fathers to declare it an anathema. Therefore, the council was reacting more to their feelings concerning origin and all teachings of rebirth than any sincere searchings into spiritual scripture. They had met with the principal purpose of officially rejecting all teachings concerning preexistence of the soul and the philosophy of rebirth. Why the church fathers found a belief in rebirth undesirable is not difficult to explain. It seemed at variance with their new dogmas. If one believed one was to be reborn and given further opportunities for salvation, such an idea thwarted their new dogma of eternal damnation. Nor was the knowledge of cyclic return of the soul in a long series of lives reconcilable with their new dogma of vicarious atonement and the resurrection of the physical form. The idea that one sojourn upon earth was the soul's final and irrevocable opportunity seemed a vital necessity. Many of the ancient quarrels between the Gnostics and the early church fathers were predicated upon this very fact. The Gnostics holding firmly to the doctrine of reincarnation and the church fathers repudiating it. Simply because the church fathers won this philosophical war does not by any means prove that they were right. Such councils also condemned Joan of Arc to the fire because she would not recant her voices. A church council also condemned Galileo's heliocentric theory and threatened extreme measures unless he recanted. His retraction did not prove that Galileo was wrong, for he was right and the church was wrong. The planets revolve around the sun. They always have, and they always will, church councils notwithstanding. Obviously, God does not change divine laws to suit the decisions of men. Christians who reject the teaching of rebirth on the belief that it is inconsistent with certain Christian creeds and dogmas should give thought to the fact that creeds and dogmas which they uphold so vehemently were composed and interjected into the scriptures much later than the writings upon which true Christianity was originally based. For instance, St. Jerome, in his Vulgate translation of the Holy Bible in 382 AD, obviously inserted many new verses and changed others. In his translations, there first appear verses concerning the resurrection of man's physical form at the judgment day. Eusebius also contributed dogmas to the new religion contrary to the original scriptural writings. Those now who renounce rebirth based upon the present King James Version of the Bible would do well to study the original scriptures before these writers translated them. However, even in its present form, it should be noted that there is nothing in the Bible which contradicts the doctrine. Certainly, Jesus, the light of the Christian world, accepted and taught it. And considering the changes these writers made in Christ's teachings gives us pause for profound questioning. Whose teachings are Christians to follow? Those of Jerome and Eusebius, or those of Jesus the Christ? Reincarnation and the Bible. Despite all efforts to delete them, the Bible still contains several references to reincarnation. The prophets themselves in the Old Testament, which is also the scripture of the Judaic tradition, prophesies the reappearance of Elijah. Isaiah tells of the coming of one who would be a forerunner of the Messiah. The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert the highway of our God. Isaiah 43. Almost 500 years after Elijah was translated into heaven without experiencing physical death, 2 Kings 2:11, Malachi prophesies that Elijah would be the prophet who would return to earth as a chosen forerunner of the Messiah. Behold, I will send you, Elijah the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Thus, 2 of the prophets themselves spoke of the reincarnation of a forerunner, and Malachi identified him as the prophet Elijah. In the New Testament, St. Matthew refers pointedly to the ancient prophecy. In those days came John the Baptist, preaching in the wilderness of Judea and saying, Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he who was spoken of by the prophet Isaiah, when he said, The voice of one crying in the wilderness, Prepare ye the way of the Lord, makes his paths straight. St. Luke refers to the conception of John the Baptist as the promised forerunner. Now when he, Zechariah, was serving as priest before God, when his division was on duty, according to the custom of the priesthood, it fell to him by lot to enter the temple of the Lord and burn incense. and there appeared to him an angel of the Lord. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John, and he will turn many of the sons of Israel to the Lord of their God, and he will go before him in their spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready for the Lord a people prepared." Thus Zechariah and Elizabeth, the parents of the boy, had full knowledge that their son was a reincarnation of the prophet Elijah, sent to prepare the way of the coming Messiah. When John the Baptist came through the Jordan Valley, preaching and baptizing, the populace asked curious questions of him. Being familiar with the prophecy of Malachi and listening to John's words, in which he declared himself to be a forerunner of a great one whose shoelaces he was not worthy to latch, brought the obvious question, "Art thou Elias?" Elias is the Hebrew translation of Elijah. John denied being a reincarnation of that prophet Elias, for, having not yet attained his highest initiation, his consciousness apparently retained no memory of this incarnation. But the fact remains that, though he protested being Elijah, he did not deny the law of reincarnation. He seemed to accept it as a completely natural reality. It is quite a different matter to deny being a particular personality in a past life than to deny there is such a thing as a past life. It was after John's death that Jesus spoke in confidence to his disciples that John had indeed been Elijah. Their free discussion of the return of Elijah thus points directly to their acceptance of the law of return. And as they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds concerning John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to behold? A reed shaken by the wind? Why then did you go out? To see a man clothed in soft raiment? Behold, those who wear soft raiment are in kings' houses. Why then did you go out? To see a prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. For this is he of whom it is written, 'Behold, I send my messenger before thy face, who shall prepare thy way before thee.' Truly, I say to you, among those born of women, there has risen no one greater than John the Baptist. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who was to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Another incident happened in Palestine on the slopes of Mount Hermon, situated a few miles north of the Sea of Galilee. Walking the slopes of the mount one day and approaching Caesarea Philippi, the master stopped the disciples to put a question to them. "Whom do men say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But whom do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the powers of death shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. In these verses, the master refers not only to reincarnation, but to the opened third eye of Simon, which he attained his knowledge that Jesus was the Christ. It would also seem that the master was revealing to Simon that he was the reincarnation of someone called Peter in his past life. Certainly, it was more than simply changing Simon's name. "And I tell you, you are Peter." And the power or rock upon which the future church was to be built was not upon the name of the man Peter. Rather, it was the rock of truth, that of the opened third eye of perception and the knowledge of rebirth. In this new light of explanation, consider these biblical scriptures carefully. What do you suppose the great master meant when he questioned his disciples, "Whom do men say that I am?" What sense could such a question have made if reincarnation had not been the subject under discussion? And what sense indeed would the answer, "Some say Elias or Jeremiah," have made? Apparently, the subject was so popularly understood that it was not necessary to teach of it, only to speak of the identity of certain individuals as they came again into rebirth. It is interesting knowing that Elijah and John the Baptist are the same, to trace the law of karma in his life. In the Old Testament, the great prophet Elijah appears in Israel at the time of the rule of King Ahab and his wife Jezebel, daughter of the ruler of the Phoenician kingdom of Tyre. Elijah rose up to denounce the worship of Baal, which Jezebel had established. In his campaign to halt this idolatry, Elijah planned and carried out the slaying of the priests of Baal. Jezebel, enraged at Elijah's act, swore vengeance upon him, but Elijah escaped her wrath. In the New Testament, 900 years later, Elijah and Jezebel face each other again. John as a rebirth of Elijah, and Herodias as Jezebel returned. Again, John the Baptist denounces her, and again she swears vengeance. In this life, Herodias is the victor. The slaying of John the Baptist leveled the karmic debt which he had incurred when he caused the death of the prophets of Baal at the brook of Rishon. Had his death at the hands of Herodias not been karmically necessary, there is little doubt that Jesus the Christ could have engineered his escape. But knowing that he was Elijah and knowing his recorded karma, Jesus was committed to non-interference. Another rebirth episode is further recorded. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain apart. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking to him. And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is well we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 booths here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He was still speaking when, lo, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces, and they were filled with awe. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Rise and have no fear. And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. And the disciples asked him, Then why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come? He replied, Elijah does come, and he is to restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah is already come, and they did not know him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. In the book of St. John, 9, chapters 1 through 3, or verses 1 through 3, Jesus apparently refers to the law of reincarnation and karma. And as Jesus passed, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. Obviously, the great teacher was trying to point out that this particular man, in this particular embodiment, had done nothing to warrant such a punishment, since the affliction was on him at birth. Neither had his parents committed the sin which would have brought about such a tragedy. He was attempting to show that the cause lay in some divine law beyond the present personality or his parents, obviously a cause committed in a previous incarnation. Jesus was very careful to show that the law was just, since he called it the works of God. Jesus and reincarnation. Jesus came with the most difficult of all assignments, to teach humanity the regeneration of one's physical form and how to immortalize it. Though Jesus may not have referred constantly to reincarnation in his teachings, he most certainly spoke of it to his chosen disciples. Jesus made a clear distinction between that which he said to his disciples, to whom it was given to know the mysteries of the kingdom, and the populace, to whom he spoke in parables. Jesus and his disciples were initiates of the highest mysteries. From an esoteric point of view, there may be a very obvious reason why he did not stress the doctrine of reincarnation to the masses. Since Jesus' philosophy accentuated the salvation of the mortal soul, it is possible that he chose not to lay stress upon the soul's future opportunities through rebirth. He placed great emphasis upon striving for salvation here and now in the present physical form. He seemed to make intense effort to indoctrinate his followers toward the eventuality of resurrecting the physical form while embodied in that form. He spoke of himself as a forerunner of a new race, and as such, he performed all manner of miracles, such as disappearing from the midst of the multitude, walking on the water, healing the sick, manipulating the chemistry of the ethers to produce food, and called our attention to performing these feats for ourselves. All in all, he seemed far more anxious to point us to perfecting ourselves while abiding in the physical form than in teaching of unnumbered rebirths. Perhaps he deliberately avoided referring frequently and publicly to reincarnation. In his wisdom, he knew that such a doctrine is the most illuminative of all teachings when rightly understood, but a disastrous one for those who, because of it, deliberately delay overcoming temptation, adopting an attitude of laissez-faire. Jesus was aware that the cosmic door of the Aryan age, the cycle of the age of Aries, was soon to close upon the life wave of the planet. The Piscean age was at hand. He knew there would be no time for further opportunities for rebirth. Jesus knew that he had come to give himself as a sacrifice so that a great many souls might be saved for the imminent Piscean age. His crucifixion was also to absolve much of the planetary karma of the Aryan age, enabling the planet and its spiritual seekers to pass purified into the Piscean force field. Just so, we now await the closing of the cosmic door as the planet passes from the Piscean into the Aquarian age, taking the spirituality enlightened of the Piscean age with it into the more highly enlightened future. The Aquarian age is at hand. We shall have more to teach concerning these mysteries in later lessons. Gabriel's horn. A clarion call of the trumpet, which the dogmatists term the blowing of Gabriel's horn, is to the mystic the call which resounds through the ethers at the closing of a great age, the call which heralds the cosmic judgment day for the souls of that life wave, and the closing of the cosmic door. Responding to the inner call, the saved do indeed rise up, along with the planet, into the clouds or new force field of purified ethers, while those who do not attend to the call of spirit, who neglect their spiritual lives, are lost to a less advanced life wave. All right, we're going to stop here. We'll pick it up, the destiny of rebirth, at the next, let's see what that will be, the 1st of August, Monday. And who would like to do a little experiment, or at least receive an experimental healing? How about that? Yes? Okay. So we will again practice with our beloved Kuthumi. Just be receptive. Make sure your arms are not crossed, your legs are not crossed. Place the tip of the tongue to the palate. Just be aware of your heart and be aware of your crown. If you'd like, you can gently project your love and your gratitude. And let's project that to Lord Kuthumi and to the Astarian hierarchy, and to the Supreme God, to the Great Architect. Please accept this tiny, humble offering. Our love, our gratitude. Really good. Lord Kuthumi, Lord Kuthumi, Lord Kuthumi. May all incarnated souls be transformed. May all incarnated souls be redeemed. May all incarnated souls be sanctified. May all incarnated souls be cleansed. May all incarnated souls be consecrated to change one's thinking toward holiness. This we ask in thy name. Amen. Lord Kutumi, may the emotional body, mental body of all those on this call, all those who have sent in prayer petitions, prayer requests, healing petitions, healing requests, be purified. Have thoughts of love, of joy, of happiness, and of peace. May these thoughts manifest in their thoughts, emotions, speech, and actions, and in their hearts. May all the auras be filled with virtue. Only good can come to me. Only good shall go from me. I give thanks. I give thanks. I give thanks. Just be aware of a beautiful violet light inside the heart, moving up to the crown, and the light in the heart is constantly feeding the light on the crown. Just allow your consciousness to expand. Imagine a beautiful violet light inside the heart, surrounding, moving brighter and brighter and bigger in all 8 directions above and below, filling the etheric body, the emotional body, the mental body, filling all the auras with a beautiful, pure violet light. The great architect, may we be a channel through which thy holy ones approach the world. May we be a center for the radiation of thy power. We, here and now, with all that we are of weakness and of strength, offer ourselves, all our thoughts, emotions, sensations, aspirations, volitions, and actions to the service of our fellow beings during the hours of this morning, this day, this night. May all our forces, capacities, and inherent powers be used toward this end. We give ourselves wholly to thy service. Fill our consciousness with the sublime realization of your exalted presence. While we are attuned to your divine vibrations, touch us with your spirit, that our thoughts may be quickened, Keep us steadfast in our search for your truth and reveal to us the workings of your laws. May your peace and consciousness descend upon us now and enfold us with love everlasting. So be it. To all the great ones, to Holy Master Choa, Bodhipapa Sambhava, to the Circle of Seven, Robert and Erlin, Master Astalea, Lord Kutumi, Lord Rama, Lord Zoser, the Astarian hierarchy, to the Lord Christ, the Lord Yehoshua, our higher souls, our celestial guides, we thank you, thank you, thank you. How does that feel? Feel peaceful? Good, 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 good. Namaste. Thank you so, so much. We'll see you for the first weekend in August, August 1st. Have a beautiful rest of the week. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. You can reach me at Anthony@Astara. Okay? Namaste. Blessings be to all. Thank you so much. Namaste.